Okay, hi everybody. Our next session is going to be a panel session, and it's on the future of data analytics. We've got some great speakers lined up for you, and I'm now going to hand over to the chair of the panel. It's Aimie Chapple, and she's Managing Director of Innovation at Accenture. So over to you, Aimie.
Fantastic. Well, it's a real delight to be with all of you here today. As was said, I'm Aimie Chapple. I'm the head of innovation at Accenture. And one of the reasons I was so excited to come and see you today was because in my program over the last 3 years, I've sat with boards of companies, and this question about data and analytics comes up almost every time. And it's really that question, I guess, about, well, what does it really mean to us? Do we have something of value? Should we care? Who else will care? And I guess that most important question of how do we turn insight into real action. I'm really delighted to be joined by these guys, which I'll let introduce themselves in a second. But hopefully, you'll also have some questions. So I'm telling you now, we'd love to take some towards the end. And so think about what you want to say. So I'm going to ask each of these guys to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about where they come from, how they got into this game, and also what they think the next 18 months holds as far as the conversation around data and analytics. So John, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Aimie. Good afternoon, everybody. John Callan. I work for a company called Qlik. You may know our products, QlikView or QlikSense. I've been with Qlik for nearly 5 years. My background, my educational background, and the early part of my career is as an engineer. I got a master's degree in engineering, and I think that's relevant to the world of analytics because a lot of what I did when I studied in graduate school was analyzing data. The data happened to be scientific data, but really, I think that's the draw that's brought me into the business analytics space. I started in business analytics with a company called TIBCO and then moved into Qlik. So it's a really exciting space. It's one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing segment of the IT market, as many of you know, which makes it very, very interesting and challenging. There's a lot of other players in the space. And I think the future really holds, the 12, 18 month and even beyond horizon. You'll continue to hear about big data, but you'll start to hear more and more about how do you access that data, who can access it, and I think you'll hear that as a common theme probably from all of us. It's really about opening up accessibility to more and more people to get benefit from analytics.
Fantastic, John. Thanks. Do you want to go, Mark?
I'm Mark Darbyshire. I'm Chief Technology Officer for SAP in the UK. I started my life in IT building trading floors for the likes of Reuters, which was a perfect example of taking data, ideally analytical, from an exchange, putting that in front of a trader, letting them make some decisions, and then place some trades. So I've always been very interested in that process where you take data, you visualize it, you make some decisions, you take some action. The speed at which you can do that in financial services obviously very quickly eliminated the trader and replaced them with a computer or an algorithm. My background, I've been at SAP now just over a year. Like John, I also have a bit of a middleware background, and I've always been interested in taking that real-time data and visualizing it. So previously, both John and I had done things like, what does it mean to look at that data in real time? What does it mean then to take the actions? And also, how do you close the loop between the action and what you wanted the action to be? It's no good your colleagues going, well, I saw this in the graph, so I decided to shut down the business. You might have a bit of a problem at that point. Where do I see it going? So I kind of see three things. I see the industrialization of big data. So whether that's making it more accessible or bringing it closer into the rest of the organization and its decision-making processes. I also see, obviously, real-time data becoming increasingly important. But I think also I start to see the relevance and the inclusion of new sets of data. So where does IoT sit? Is Internet of Things just a big data project? Does it rely on some of my existing enterprise information? And how's that going to start to get involved and start to have a bigger part to play in the benefits that the business sees? So I think it's quite an exciting time. I do also notice that between the three of us, we all feel that obviously people should be making more use of analytics. My organization says that 10% of your organization makes use of analytics. Oracle I think it's 18%, and you're currently at 25%. But I think we'd all like to see but somewhere around 100%. And maybe a question that the audience could think about is, why isn't your organisation making use of analytics for every employee? Or conversely, what would every employee's use of analytics be? So if you haven't got any questions, maybe that could start to make you think of some questions for later on.
Thanks, Mark. And Nick?
So I'm Nick Whitehead. I work for Oracle. I've been in the analytics business for the last 20 years, 17 of those with Oracle. And I'm responsible for Oracle's go-to-market strategy around business analytics here in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I also have an engineering background. In fact, when I was a real engineer, I was responsible for building command control systems for submarines, which was a very interesting aspect of analytics, because if you know anything about that business, it's all about figuring what's going on around you and trying to make sense of very sparse data sources to understand what's out there. Is it going to hurt you? So it's a long way back, but it's very interesting, I think, in terms of analytics. It's evident, I think, from most of the research that's done, not least by Accenture with their high-performing organizations research, that high-performing organizations use analytics more than twice as much as what they would deem as low-performing organizations. Now, Accenture are not the only people who have found out this fact. There's research from MIT, for example, the Sloan Institute, and several others, which have clearly managed to establish a link between organizations who are more data-driven and more focused on making decisions based on facts presented to them, can perform higher in their own businesses. But at the same time, I reflect on the comment made just a moment ago by Mark, which is that only, in our case, 18% of organizations actually are able to use analytics effectively. So there's a mismatch there. And what I see as far as the future of analytics is that we're starting to see business people become much more interested in becoming more data-driven, and in order to achieve that, they need to have much more access to insight on the data they have and the data they want to have. It's no longer sufficient for IT to spoon up to a business user a set of dashboards with some metrics and KPIs which enable them to understand how their business is going, because typically business people confronted with that information want to explore beyond the dashboards, look at new data sources very quickly and assimilate new information from what's confronting them, and explore what they might do about that fact in their business, which will allow them to act differently or take advantage of a new and different business opportunity. So for me, it's about making analytics a whole lot more accessible to real business people and enabling them to gain insight quickly on data that they've never before had access to as provided by IT. So that's where I'm coming from.
So just by a show of hands, if you think about your own organizations, how many of you think that you're using data and analytics effectively today in your organizations? There's a few. How many of you think it's important for the future of what you're going to do? Okay, a lot more. So we have a warm room, right?
Yeah, we do.
To kind of do, which is good, Yeah. So guys, as we think about this question, I certainly know that the clients that I'm dealing with on a daily basis in the Innovation Center are asking this question about how should we really be thinking about the value of the data we have today? How can we get our arms around it? And I'm interested, we have both Qlik, who probably is in a maturing startup-y, kind of more disruptive type mode, and Oracle's and SAP have been around forever, from what I can tell, right? I'm interested in some of your thoughts about what this means. Who wants to go first?
Shall I take it first?
Yeah, go for it.
In terms of getting value from the information, I think there's two aspects to that. First of all, getting more value from the information that they already have within their organization, which is typically managed by maybe a central IT organization. So it's professionally curated and managed and modeled data managed by IT, and getting more value from that just by providing with business users with much more appealing, more visually attractive analytic environments in which to not just see facts, but also explore facts beyond that. But at the same time, as I said just a moment ago, just relying on the information that IT provides is not sufficient.
Yeah.
I think in order to get value, you need to provide business users with very simple ways of taking new data, very often quite transient data, which is pertinent to them at the moment that it matters, and being able to link that information which they have in their own personal systems or can grab from outside, linking it with the professionally curated data source that IT provides, and then making sense of that to explore, as I said, beyond the dashboard. So I think
so
that's
some exploration. I heard the word curate.
Visualization.
I heard visualization. I heard professionalize. What else? What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I think you could apply real time to all of those.
Okay.
I think, to your point, looking at transient data, that's real-time data, and I need to crunch that data in real time. So if I'm looking at, say, log files from my website, I need to correlate that data in real time with my IP infrastructure, or else I don't know what the IP addresses mean. As you move around the UK, as you're watching the Great British Bake Off, and your IP address changes, I can't see that it's you anymore.
Yeah.
So I need to do that, the correlation and some of the analysis of that in real time. And then that then becomes more trusted data. So the time lag between the data arriving into the organization and people in the business being able to use that, I need to reduce that, because that's often the hurdle that the business people need to overcome.
Yeah.
I think the other point then is provide it to them, as Nick said, provide it to them in a way that not only they can consume, but it's more interactive. Don't just give them a dashboard, give them a dashboard with some buttons and maybe a timer that says, if you don't make a decision in 5 minutes, this is what's going to happen.
Right, okay. So something
So no longer am I just going to say, well, we gave it to the business and the business didn't do anything with it. That's not really acceptable anymore. It's a bit lazy, isn't it? It's a little bit like I've written some code and I'm going to chuck it over the fence and you can test it, which is a little bit of an old world attitude. What we need to do to provide to the business is, here's the analytics, here's a set of what recommended actions. You tell us why you're not going to do it, because we need to get on with running the business, not you sit there in a perfect ivory tower of information and insight. So real time is a thread that, if you will, runs through every aspect of the analytical pipeline, from getting the data, crunching the data, displaying the data, visualizing it, taking action, and understanding what the impact of that action was.
Yeah.
If I give you a graph today and you reach one decision from it, you might reach another decision tomorrow and take a different action. So the decisioning and the actions that come after that need to be real time as well. Businesses need to start to look at that and then start to instrument that as well.
Yeah. So this real time and being able to almost predict what you should be doing next.
Yeah. Tell us why
context.
you're not going to do this.
Yeah. Okay. What about Qlik? What is Qlik thinking? What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, we believe that business intelligence is optimized when you can harness the collective human intelligence. So in other words, the more that people have access to and use analytics, the more value that you get from analytics and your investment in analytics. So from a value point of view, we think of it along two axes. One is, what are you actually doing with the analytics? And for a very long time, business intelligence, or prior to that, decision support systems, or prior to that, management information systems, told you what happened. So if you had a predefined set of questions around your business, KPIs, for example, around what happened, how many products did I sell in country, in quarter, that you would get that. And it's important, but it's relatively low analytic value.
Right.
Where you get into higher analytic value is when you can start doing diagnosis. Why did something happen? Why did I sell product X in country Y? Or why did I not sell product X in country Y? So there's a greater degree of value associated with that. And then you continue along that continuum and you get to predictive analytics. What is likely to happen? So that's the first axis to think about when you're thinking about how do I get maximum analytic value from a solution. The second, and probably more important axis, is who can access the analytics? People. And if you think about the spectrum with the descriptive, what happened? A lot of people can get access to static reports and limited use dashboards. Fewer people can actually get access to tools that answer why did something happen. And even fewer people get access to tools about what is likely to happen. This is really the world of the data scientists. But if you can expose and provide access to more people to all of those three curves, what happened, why, and what is likely to happen, that's where you're going to achieve the most analytic value. So that's kind of our philosophy at Qlik. We're really striving towards addressing those two axes.
So what does good look like when we think about, accessing data in the organization? You're talking about maybe potentially everybody accessing it. What does that? What does good look like when you're approaching a data analytics project? How do you organize yourselves to actually take advantage? Is it IT that drives it? Is it the business that drives it? Is it everyone that drives it? What does good look like in your experiences?
So I think it's evident that today the information asset of the organization, the formal statements of point of record for most organizations is owned and managed by IT. And I think it's probably quite important that IT continue to retain access over that control over that information asset, because you know what? When a finance director is making decisions based on that statement of record, it has to be accurate, up-to-date, reliable, consistent. You know, it has to be all those things. So that is important, and that's the role that IT can continue to have in this space. But it's absolutely not sufficient to expect, to your point earlier, expect business users to rely exclusively on that after-the-fact statement of record on the state of their business and make decisions on that. So the ability to unleash business people to be able to innovate and explore information that might be available to them very, very easily with new tools and better visualization becomes the second part of that story, because if you can't let business people do what they do every day of their working life, which is to test hypotheses, try out an innovation, fail fast, using data to inform the decision making, if you don't let them do that in a highly appealing way, then they will never, ever be satisfied with analytics. They will never get beyond that 18% penetration of analytics within the business community in most organizations. So.
And do organizations have the skills, Mark, do you think?
Yeah, I think they do. To Nick's point, I don't disagree that a lot of the data that you're going to use for your data projects is going to be in your systems of record. But there'll also be data that's in your systems of innovation and your systems of differentiation.
Yeah.
And this is possibly more transient data, more short-term data. But it allows, to your point, if I want my business people to be able to make real-time decisions or be able to make decisions on what's happening now, I need to be confident that my IT department can embellish that system of record story with what's coming from the systems of innovation and the systems of differentiation. And quite often what happens is IT doesn't own them. They often get called things like shadow IT or a little project that's going on in marketing that tells us what's going on now. And there's nothing wrong with that, but IT might need to evolve a little bit, and maybe this is a cultural evolution, in order to be able to welcome those data sets into what the business is used to consuming.
Yeah. Anything different?
So I think you mentioned skills. I think we all have the skills. Human beings are naturally born analysts. What's stopping us from analyzing data are the tools, the technology. And so what you're going to see in the future, and what you have seen over the last number of years, is a greater emphasis on making technology more accessible to people, because we are natural born analysts. Allow people to analyze data, make the decisions that they can very quickly. But I think very, very importantly, to do it in a controlled environment. What you've seen in our industry particularly over the last 4, 5, 6 years, is a huge emphasis on self-service tools, self-service data visualization. It's the fastest growing segment of our market. And for good reason, because business people have to make decisions very quickly. They have to have agile technology, and they can't wait for a new report to be spun up for them. They can't wait for a new data element or data set to be added to their system of record data. So they're turning to data visualization tools. The problem with that is that that's done in an ungoverned, uncontrolled environment. So when people are making decisions based on data that has been analyzed in a self-service tool, very often, because they don't know where the data came from or who's changed it, the debate becomes around the data itself and not about the decision. And that's a huge problem. So you're seeing now a greater emphasis towards what's called governed data discovery, or bimodal operations, where you have IT and business working together. It's a very tough problem to solve. It's a very hard engineering problem to solve, but that's where things are going.
And I guess that makes me really interested in who in the organization makes decisions based on data. I remember probably a year ago talking a little bit about how most organizations are organized around hippos, right? The highest paid person in the organization makes the decision. And I guess as we think about what the digital world means, right, we have a real possibility for experience closest to the customer or to the problem or to the decision by using data and analytics to help us. What's your thoughts about experience and making decisions? Is there a different way we need to organize to make this happen in cultures? What about, how does the culture change in organizations when
I
they
think,
do this well?
If the way it plays out, as we've all three of us, I think, described, which is that you're pushing analytic tools which mean something to everybody. You know, in most organizations, decision makers exist at every single level, whether it's the very highest level, but people managing a particular process within their organization make decisions every day. What we can do with analytics, if we get it right, is to make every decision that everybody makes the best it can possibly be at the moment that matters, when that decision can affect change in their business.
Yeah.
And that's not just about the hippo guys, it's about everybody within the organization. That doesn't happen today, and the reason it doesn't happen is because people who are lower down in the organization, still decision makers, are not empowered to make decisions based on data because they just simply don't have access to the data to make it happen. So I think we will see a democratization of accessible information which is used for decision making if we can affect this industry, in which I think all three of us would like to see.
Yeah. Mark, we had a discussion before this a little bit about how data and analytics have been out there forever. Why is it changing now? Is there something different in the environment that's making it possible?
I think due to the consumerization of IT generally, people are beginning to realize, hey, I can do that. It's no different to the Great British Bake Off. It's a bunch of folk that can make cakes as well as a professional. So the differentiation is going away a little bit. I sometimes get a little bit annoyed, maybe, that there's a constant reference to the data scientist. And that paints the person that can do something with data into a very particular corner. And that might be appropriate in some scenarios, and that might be what the organization wants to convey, that there's value in their algorithms, there's value in their capabilities. If I'm an exploration organization, that's exceedingly important to me. But to your point, and to Nick's point, there's also a whole bunch of people in the organization that are never going to be data scientists. They might be data home cooks, or data restaurant critics, that maybe get involved with data in a slightly less profound way. But the decisions that they make and how they feel about that coming away from that are just as important.
Yeah.
And so it's how do we, and I think this is the point that John's been making, how do we make the data more available to those people? And not just, okay, here's a spreadsheet, you go figure it out.
Yeah.
You've got to take them a little bit further along the path. You can't just rock up and say, okay, look, here's a £20,000 kitchen, cook.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to guide them a little bit more in a way that doesn't limit them. And that can be very difficult. And I think that's a lot more about the culture and how we as organizations and as vendors, how we approach the data. Yeah. I think we've had a good 5-6 years of wandering around talking about data scientists, and that's great, and I've still got the beard as a result of that. But I think there's a lot of other parts of the organisation that are just sat there going, doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
And it's on us to help those people get there.
I guess today we can crunch a lot of data, right? Storage has become cheaper. There's more data potentially out there. This discussion about big data and what it means. And I remember you saying to me, as Qlik got into the business with visualization, but visualization is only part of it. It's not sufficient.
That's right.
When we think about big data and all the things that are out there, how important is that in the equation? Should people be excited, worried, trying to capture it all? Where do they...
Yeah, so I think just picking up on a phrase that Nick said earlier, the notion of fail fast. You're seeing that a lot more now in the exercise of extracting value from big data solutions. Most of the data that is sitting in a Hadoop cluster is noise, it's garbage, and it's there because you can collect it. And the challenge for analysts nowadays is to extract. It's kind of like, if you look at an ocean and you're going fishing, you can't fish the entire ocean. So you'll pick out a segment and you'll fish that. And try and see if you're going to get something out of that. And the same notion occurs in big data analytics. And the value comes in if you can fail fast, if you can pick out that segment in the ocean and realize there's actually nothing in there and do it very quickly and move on to the next segment, then that's where the value is. Because we all inherently know there is value in a big data solution. The challenge is how do you extract it? And it's very difficult unless you have data mining and heavy statistical analysis, which is one part of it. But again, going back to the notion of democratization of data and making data more accessible, not everybody has that skill set or set of or even access to those capabilities. So that's our approach, is pulling out those chunks, analyzing it, failing quickly, and moving on.
What about you guys? Anything else on that?
Big data. So it won't have escaped your mind, I don't think, that the world is making a digital copy of itself. So datafication in most businesses, in most industries, is very, very apparent. So, and that is very interesting because it creates a hell of a lot of data. And to your point, John, actually sifting through that vast ocean of data there's two problems with that. One is, how do you manage it? Well, I think the industry is quite good at doing that and becoming much, much better at it. And not many of you will have pure data warehouse type structures. You'll be looking to explore where you can build a much broader pool of information which has been datified. And then the second part is, to your point, John, enabling business users to actually not fish in a tiny part of that pool, but to actually look at the whole ocean. And to do that, not just with statistical techniques, of course, in several industries, particularly in finance, banking, they're well used to using statistical techniques to separate out the signal from the noise in that vast ocean of data that's now available to them, and provide tools to, again, I come back to that visualization topic again, but to help them to visualize and spot the signals in that noise by spotting patterns and anomalies without necessarily resorting to experienced quants in the back office who are using statistical techniques. What can we do to help them to explore that vast ocean of data that's now available to them to do that? And we see that a lot in banking and telco. We typically see it around anything. Well, anybody who's managing customers and wants to affect change in the way in which they work with customers is very excited and interested in how the datafication of their interaction with customers can provide them with a much broader, better picture of how customers behave, what customers want, what they aspire to, how they want to interact with you, what they think of your brand. That's hugely interesting from an analytical point of view to any organization involved in a B2C environment.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that because if datafication is about Internet of Things, then you can start to instrument many, many different types of business processes and affect change in logistics, in manufacturing, by being able to get much better transparency in the day-to-day processes that organizations become involved in to be able to optimize those processes. And just one more point, which is any organization who's interested in managing risk better, whether it's reputational risk, whether it's fraud, whether it's churn in a telco, once you have access, once you've datified everything, you've got instrumented all that information, you can certainly be much more effective in being able to spot the signals in that noise which represent risk to an organization and act on it fast, to your point, real time. So I think for us, big data, that's what big data is about. There's three primary use cases and the opportunity to spot the signal in the noise without resorting to data scientist type skills.
It reminds me, my daughter, my 15-year-old, drugged me to the films this weekend, and we saw the movie The Intern, which, if you haven't seen it yet, is about a senior intern going into an internet company. And one of the things in one of those scenes that really struck me was that by putting this data in his hands, he was very quickly able to spot trends that others couldn't see. So experience made a difference in that sense. And I guess I'm interested in how this world, the experience of the legacy of all of the organizations that we've been part of and that we're running, and I guess the world of things like artificial intelligence and how it comes into the world of data and analytics, how that plays out. I don't know if you have a thought, Mark, or if it might.
Thanks.
Yeah?
I think obviously it plays out quite sensibly now as using big data as a platform to capture that.
Yeah.
And I think to Nick's point, big data addresses that storage problem or the storage economics.
Yeah.
I think what we've seen is as people bring in those new data sets or bring in those new algorithmic approaches such as machine learning, such as AI, all of that's good, but how do I make that fast?
Yeah.
How do I make it fast to get the value out and fast to ignore it?
Yeah.
And the one thing that we also find, and this is, how do I monetize that data?
Yeah.
So a lot of times what we'll find is that people will take an approach where they'll crunch a sea of data and they'll reduce it down to a lake, or they'll extract the salt from it, however you want to look at that metaphor. And that will give them some insight, but they still need to monetize that. And that's where I find that they need to integrate with some of those older systems, some of those legacy systems. because those legacy systems will have contracts.
Yeah.
There will be CRM. That will be your tariffing model.
Yeah.
So to the telco use case, I could use cool data records. I could crunch them quite happily in Hadoop. It would take me overnight because Hadoop only allows me to crunch a large amount of data. It doesn't allow me to crunch it quickly. So it doesn't give me fast data. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. Following morning, I've got 20,000 people that I think might be churn possibility. But I'm a telco, and I know that less than 10% of my subscriber base, actually I make a profit with. I need to keep the other 90% so they've got people they can make phone calls to.
Sure.
So I still need to correlate that list of 20,000 from my big data insight with, okay, who do I get several £1,000s from a month? So I'm still going back, I'm still correlating it with my old systems. And that's what I think your intern's doing, is that they've been given a tool that just gives them faster insight or better insight into existing data sets. They're not there going, I'm going to write some pig and I'm going to get round this and I'm going to bring together 4 different data sets that have never been combined before.
Yeah.
Partly because it would be weird in a movie, admittedly.
Probably.
But also because that's not enabling the person. That's just giving them a whole bunch of complexity.
Yeah.
So I still think, big data's great, and it's a direct benefit of the economics of storage.
Yeah.
Still need to make that faster, and we still need to get that out to more people.
Okay, good. If you guys have questions, you can start raising your hand and we'll bring the mic. So I think we have one up here, if we can.
Hello. So we work with most of the blue chip clients in the industry, and most of them have the latest sort of technologies in the offices, like Qlik views and Tableaus and all the best ones. But don't you think that we are neglecting an important aspect of analytics we haven't even touched base in this session is predictive analytics? There are not enough tools in the market which are efficient enough to predictively possibly determine another 2008-9 crisis and avoid it in the future?
Yeah, so the whole question of predictive analytics. Do you want to start with that one?
I'll start. Predictive analytics is clearly everybody, vendors and customers, would want to get there. And we want to get to a point where you have a dashboard and you press a button and it tells you the future. We can't even predict the weather with any great degree of accuracy beyond, a day or two. It's an extremely hard problem to solve. I think where you see approach from us, and I'm sure from the others on the panel, is to merge in and to develop predictive algorithms where appropriate, and to do it in a way that is consistent with what your proposition is to your customers. So in the case of Qlik, like I say, it's all about empowering more people. We need to do that in a way where individuals who really aren't data scientists or statisticians can benefit from predictive models. I think where the intersection is from a technology and a human point of view is how can you actually use your intuition as a business leader and use your experience to validate a predictive model that has been sent back to you. And I think that's the more interesting thing to think about. Rather than having a machine tell you what's going to happen, actually give a variety of different outcomes and have the person, the individual who has the experience, actually make a decision based on that. Because our philosophy is that people will continue to make decisions for a long time in the future, and probably forever, right? There absolutely are segments of the market, particularly in the trading world, where you've got algo trading, absolutely. But that's a relatively small segment of the overall analytics market. And so the focus has to be on empowering people. So predictive, very important, tough nut to crack.
What do you guys think? Anything
so
different?
I think John is absolutely right. But I do also think that there is increasing role to play for machine learning in predictive analytics in specific cases or areas where the problem is well understood, like churn in telcos, like predicting fraud in banks. You can use machine learning, like in a call center environment, giving the best advice, or spotting somebody who might be a risk to the bank if you offer them a credit card, which is of a certain level. I think we can affect and use technology and analytic technology in those areas which are well defined in business terms to do better job of predictive analytics. But that's not the end of it. I think John's absolutely right. You have to be able to rely on an individual's intuition and help them to predict based on good insight on data.
Okay, so interesting. See what you think.
I have a little
That's
bit of a
right. Go ahead,
different
Mark.
view on
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
As a vendor of a couple of predictive technologies, we see a number of our customers doing things like predictive maintenance.
Yeah.
And for quite a few of our customers in quite a few industries, this is often their most profit-making product. So, I have organizations that will manufacture things, and they do it very well, and we're involved in that. And they will take that data, and they'll tell you when what they've manufactured is either going to need to be serviced or repaired or maintained or whatever. And the insurance, the post-sales insurance policy, in effect, that they can sell you around that is obviously based on some very clever algorithms, but it's also based on a whole bunch of data that they've got from the factory.
Yeah.
So those algorithms, how do they make those algorithms better? Well, machine learning algorithms that learn from what happens when the engine or whatever actually gets maintained. Okay, you told us to bring it in because this was about to break. It came in, and that wasn't what was wrong at all. Something else was wrong. So closing that loop back to the algorithm, I think Nick's absolutely right, and John's absolutely right, that people are going to be making the decisions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where the decision enforcement point is.
Yeah.
So I think that there's going to be a lot of how do I get people's intuition into machine learning, and then how do I get the outputs of machine learning into people's heads in a way that isn't confrontational and they don't see as an affront to their own decision-making process. I think a lot of this is going to be about psychology. So your original question is, a lot of people out there have the technology, they might not have got people to make use of it in their everyday jobs because maybe they see it as competitive to what they bring to the organization or things like that. So it's not just about the technology, it's about how do you, as a customer of our technologies, how would you consume that in a way that brings value to you and doesn't upset you?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that in the area I work in, health, right? Bringing sensor data into things is also another data source that will be really interesting around predictive. And in healthcare, there's huge money to be saved by just being able to find the machines in a hospital. And there's data you can collect about where that is and whether they're maintained or not. But also, I think in mining, you're seeing a lot where putting sensors in all of the different environments that people are working, you can predict whether somebody might be tired and need to take a break. And if they take a break, they won't actually break the machinery, which costs a fortune to actually replace. So I think looking at how we combine data sets will be really important. There was another question over here. That one.
Hi.
Perfect, yeah?
How can we expect to open up access to all of our data?
Can you bring the mic just a little closer?
Sorry. How can you expect to open up all of our access to our data sources in our enterprises when two rooms down, they're talking about protecting data? In the very same event. And in this magazine here, which they're distributing outside the Excel, the Security Plus magazine, it says here, the recent spate in data breaches and security threats make protection of corporate data more important, and the new EU regulation will place stronger regulation on protection of data.
Yeah. Okay, so great question. So I think the question is, how do we deal with the paradox of the idea that we really need to protect data and that data security is ever so important, and yet at the same time we all believe we have these data sets that we should open up, maybe open up through APIs or open up in other ways and make available because there's money to be made by using our data in a more open way. What do you think?
So this is a huge and raging debate within Oracle at the moment, and the reason it is because cloud is affecting our business in a very significant way. Cloud analytic environments in the cloud are self-evidently the place where we can put our innovation quickly into the marketplace. It's much easier for organizations to get hold of it, but at the same time, to your point, it creates a big debate around whether we can secure information in the cloud. And I think it's absolutely right that we need to be able to ensure that the information asset, certainly the information asset that's owned by the company, and that is also about the customer data that they own as an organization, needs to be secured and governed in a way. And that's why I said at the very beginning that I think IT have their major role in all this is to govern the information assets of the organisation, not just to make sure it's reliable, consistent, and up to date, but also to make sure that it's secure. And does cloud make that less or more of an issue? Because all of a sudden the data that you own and govern as an organisation is then not necessarily within your firewall. I would suggest that actually there is the potential for quite small organisations who can't themselves manage the security around their data and can't afford to put the infrastructure in place to manage that security, can actually benefit from putting their information in the cloud, because then that problem is outsourced to an organisation whose specialism, whose strength is managing data, managing the governance around data, managing the security around data. So, I mean, that's a big discussion point within Oracle at the moment as we go out to the market with cloud everywhere, of course, as you probably know if you follow Oracle.
Mark, you had something to add?
Yeah, I mean, as a European organisation, we're quite happy about what we're seeing happening at the moment. But I think at the end of the day, you have to trust your protocols. And I think if you went over to the security booths, there'd be a lot of guys that would tell you that their protocols are brilliant and you don't need to worry about it. And so you need to differentiate when you say, I'm opening up the data, who you're opening up to. If you're opening it up outside your organisation, then there's a complicated conversation.
Yeah.
If you're opening it up to your employees, then at some point you have to start to trust your employees. But we reached a point in the last 6 months where if you look at someone's behaviour as they use a computer system, and you look at that analytically over, say, a couple of days, you can uniquely identify that person. So I can see that if you're an employee and you start to use that data and you start to explore that data and you get some insights and you take some actions as a result of that, I would expect you to do that in certain ways. I would expect there to be 2 or 3 second gaps between you connect to a new data source and so on. If, on the other hand, I see that you log in as yourself and you suddenly connect to 30 new data sources in under 12 seconds, then maybe you're not a person anymore and actually you're a JavaScript bug or a bot that's come in and is trying to break into the organisation. So I can see, or I should be able to see your fraud by looking at the employee's use of the data that I've opened up and looking at that use analytically. So I
even
don't
using
really see the
analytics on yourself can give you that. Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's another question, I think, just here. Yeah?
Yeah, really quickly, do you think that Excel will ever be overtaken as the end user analytical tool of choice?
So I think we had this discussion amongst ourselves about how many of our data projects in our organizations are really run on spreadsheets.
So,
what do you think?
The answer is no, because if you think about the reason why people use Excel, very often they're extracting views from systems of record, from data warehouses or from maybe an operational system. And the reason they're doing that is because the reports and analysis that they're being given from those systems is not sufficient. And they cannot wait for somebody else to make a change for them, because business is moving fast. And we all know this. There was a research report done by Aberdeen Group said that 45% of decision makers in a business setting have less than a day to make a decision. You simply cannot wait for systems of record, BI systems, to accommodate you for that. And that is the reason why people turn to Excel. It's not because it's a great analytics tool, right? So the challenge for vendors like all of us is to stop the necessity for people to download to Excel and to give them what they want, which is a self-service environment so they can answer those questions that haven't been answered by the report that's been given to them, but critically to address the question over there, to do it in a governed fashion. And Gartner have talked recently about the principle, the main focus in the BI space right now is on something called governed data discovery. And it's a challenge of balancing the need for security and governance and control, which is absolutely critical, with the critical at the same level need for agility and self-service. And that's, from a Qlik point of view, that has been one of our main focus points in terms of how we develop our product.
Thoughts?
I'm not sure I've got really very much to add to John,
That's fine,
except
yeah.
to recognise that Qlik and other new entrants to the marketplace have really accelerated the ability to innovate around analytics in the way that he describes. So I think new ways, new tools, new capabilities for self-service, for visualization, which makes it blindingly easy for a business user to provide an analytic view on data in a better way than you can get with Excel. Is here now in the marketplace and will accelerate the end user adoption.
So I was going to ask you guys, especially the SAPs and the Oracles of the world, and I'd say Qlik is a maturing disruptor, right? But how are these disruptors changing your world? How are they changing how you're approaching providing tools to the marketplace? And probably Qlik has some people coming to disrupt you too.
Well, I'll say very quickly, you know, in any market, there's going to be disruptors.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the business intelligence or management information system or decision support system market for decades. And yes, we have been a disruptor, and yes, there are disruptors coming in, and we like to think we're helping to disrupt ourselves. So, you know, we're keeping a close eye on everything.
What about Mark?
I think a couple of years back we were described as a disruptor in the database market. So there's still a lot of movement, a lot of change. But back to your question about Excel, I don't see why people would move off that, just as the same way most of us here have got a notepad and a pen and a piece of paper in front of us. No one's asking when's paper going to go away. So the facade or the environment with the dashboard, if you will, through which you see the data, experience the data might be the same. It's what's that connected to. And I think that's more the question, and I think that's more the onus on Excel. And I'm kind of glad Microsoft isn't here, because I'll be saying, well, why aren't you coming and talking to us about how you connect to the visualizations or the data or the algorithms that we've got in our business systems? Why aren't you making yourselves better at consuming that data into your facade?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to use Excel, fine, use Excel, but make it more powerful and make it so that it can trust those data sources. Yeah.
We've got a couple over here, so I'm gonna try to take some more questions and see.
I talk about the person that have to do this work, no? You talk about the big data and analytics, but the person himself that doing the job, the person that have to go through this data, across the data, what protection does he have, and how does the company protect him? That he doesn't have a brain or receive a brain tumor or anything.
So I think what you're saying is that as we learn how to crunch this data and we do it in an analytical way, people become less...
Yeah, the person that's doing it, how is he protected by the company?
Yeah. How does the job of the person who currently is crunching the data work in this new world, because they might lose their job in the process? What do people need to do?
I think at the moment, what these guys are doing is spending a lot of time and a lot of energy coding. So they're using coding environments on top of Hadoop to try and figure out what the data is. But actually, the good ones are the ones with the skills, the quants, the people to actually interpret in a business sense that data. What I think we will see is, as tools emerge to democratize the process of data science, that they will spend a lot more time interpreting the data and understanding the business impact of that data, and a lot less time coding in Java to try and get that insight.
So more on the insight and less on the actual crunching.
Gartner talk about these citizen data scientists, and I think we'll see that playing out in the marketplace quite strongly, where they're focused on interpreting this new data rather than manipulating in code that data.
Yeah. We got another one.
Good afternoon.
Just here.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Do you think that there will be some considerable enhancement in data analytics without hardware enhancement in memory technology, and especially in-memory, finding alternatives to in-memory technology?
So how does the whole technology
finally we get a
work?
question where the two of us are at loggerheads in the marketplace on in-memory. In-memory technology for analytics is very important, and for one reason, which is that it vastly enhances the performance of the analytic environment. And why that's important, particularly in a mobile setting, is because individuals, business people, want to interact with the information. They want to have a conversation with the data they're being confronted with. They want to explore the data. You simply cannot do that with a static report. And as soon as you are dynamically interacting with information, the end user experience for an analytic environment becomes absolutely critically important. In-memory technology, the ability to it just vastly improves the speed and therefore the end user experience of an analytic environment. That's why it's important to us. We both have very different approaches to the way in which we address and deliver in-memory analytics, but I doubt that, Mark, you disagree with my point about why it's valuable.
Are you going to add anything, or is it?
I think there's several aspects to it. I think, firstly, yeah, totally agree with Nick that in-memory will make it faster, but I think sometimes that's the blocker to the business just taking advantage of analytics. If it takes me half an hour to figure something out, I'm just not going to do it. And I've seen that play out in two ways. So at one extreme, I've seen a Central European train operator have 60 people for 40 days work out what their costs were that year and what their benefits and what their revenue was that year, so that their one shareholder, that country's government, was able to figure out how much money to give them. And if you can crunch that down, literally, to an hour, then you've got a real-time view of where you are as a business, but those 60 people could be doing something a lot more valuable to the business. But also my cab driver here, he said, what are you going to the Excel Centre for this morning? And I said, well, talk about data analytics. And he goes, well, what the hell's that? And I said, well, you've got Halo in your cab. He goes, yes. Wouldn't it be good if Halo could tell you where all the busy roads were? Because there's 5,000 of you driving around London at any point in time. You've all got your location switched on. Why can't you all take advantage of how fast your colleagues are getting around London? And we wouldn't be stuck on this stupid road, would we, mate? And he didn't ask me much after that, to be honest with you. But that to someone like Halo would be the advantage of in-memory technology. Now, whether they've got the price point to do that in-house or whether they want to do in-memory in cloud and just use in-memory as a capability to get that continual information, but it then shows you what the real advantage of in-memory is, because you can now, it's no longer just about querying the data, it's also about making the data event-driven, for example. And now no longer does the data say, well, okay, every 30 seconds, query where the 5,000 cabbies are in London and see how far each one's moved. Just tell me when you see cabbies moving under the speed of 4 miles per hour, and let's zoom in and let's look at greater detail about their movements, because he might be stationary or he might be in a traffic jam.
So as
you go, and then I'll get ready to clear that one up.
I feel I should speak because my Qlik 20 years ago, we pioneered in memory in the business intelligence space. So we've a pretty strong point of view on that. So we've seen other vendors come in with in-memory solutions, and it's really become, it has not become a differentiator in memory in itself. However, you've got to ask yourself the question, what is your in-memory solution actually doing with the data? And what is the engine actually doing? And our approach is, in-memory is very, very important because, to these guys' points, it's about fast access, fast analytics. But your engine has to actually accommodate data and lots of it. So to be able to compress it and then have an analytics capability where you're not just looking at one data set, but multiple data sets and providing associations across them. And then, yes, benefiting from the fact that it's in memory and it's fast and you can do the analytics. So it's important. In-memory used to be a differentiator, but now it's not, and it goes beyond what's going on in the engine itself.
There you go. There's one back here, I think, first, and then I see another one.
Thank you. Hello, Aimie from Cognitio. Interestingly enough, an in-memory analytics accelerator. But my question is, as the future of data analytics moves towards self-serve and self-service, how do we enable the business decision makers to become more au fait and comfortable with the data so that they learn to ask the right questions?
I think it's really important. When we think about putting, that kind of decision-making power in their hands, we actually have to help educate the leaders about what the data means and where they're getting that data from and what they're making decisions about, which is why I guess there's a little bit of the intuition and the human part in that discussion that's actually really important as well. I don't know if you guys want to add.
Well, I'll just add quickly. I think when you open up self-service, you then open up the possibility to do wrong analysis. I mean, you can look at dimensions and measures and think they are something, but in fact they're something else. You also open up the possibility of somebody defining new metrics. Somebody may think that your corporate definition of profit margin might not suit your definition and make that change, right? So The important thing is that while self-service it's never going to end, and it's been driven by the consumerization of IT, as Mark said earlier, right? We're used to doing things ourselves now, and going into our business environment, that shouldn't stop. But what's important is that the environment that you're using actually guides you in a self-service way. It gives you, for example, a library of measures, dimensions, pre-built analytics that you can use in order to answer your questions. And I think finally gives you an environment to do that in a kind of a sandbox environment, so you're not disrupting the rest of the environment, right? And you have the confidence to do that, and IT has the confidence that a business user can self-service, but they're not going to redefine the value or the metric for profit margin.
I'll let you answer while we get this question teed up. Yep, there you go, Mark.
All I was going to say very quickly is what we've started doing is using our predictive tools to tell the business user what kind of analytics they want to apply based on the data sets they've just pulled in. So to John's point, if you've just pulled in a bunch of trusted data sets, okay, fine, you pulled in this, they're called that. We can now see within our predictive tool, okay, these are the kind of analyses that people typically do with those data sets or with tables that are called those things. Why don't you try one of these 5 things? And so guide them away from making...
I'm going to let this lady take your last question, because we have time for one more, and then we're going to wrap up. So here we go.
So my question is, actually, our listening here is about the tools, the technologies. I mean, do you think that, what could make data analytic project successful within the company? Is that the tools? Is that from the data point collection or before? That means where we need to look to have the right data, even it's big data to collect. Because what I hear there is about Excel, about sophisticated tools. So is it about the culture, or that everyone in the company should be involved in that data analytic project?
Yeah, so what's going to really make a data analytics project successful? I'll let you just run down the line, and then we'll...
Sure, yeah. So, of course, it's about culture. As John said earlier, it's about people. And you need to create an environment where every single decision maker at every level in the organization becomes more comfortable with using data and becoming more data-driven in their decision-making, right at the lowest level to the very, very top. And that will only be effective if technology is provided to them, which makes it blindingly easy and simple to achieve that aim. Because if they use classic business intelligence dashboards, which don't perform very well, then they will never be comfortable with affecting that change in culture.
Yeah. So culture and experience is important. And
user experience. So getting it out onto the apps, onto the devices that the rest of the organization uses. We have a customer in the Midlands. They upgraded to the latest, greatest SAP backend. There are 20,000 people in the field, didn't see any difference. We gave them a new user experience. Productivity went up by 20%.
So making it really...
So a lot of it is just about making it consumable for those constituencies. And they're not data scientists. They're just everyday normal people. So what are the 3 key facts I need to have in order to do my job today? How do you get that information into the person's head? Why can't I listen to that on the radio on my way into work? Yeah, there's an hour of dead time. It's not just about having, if you don't mind, not just about having beautiful dashboards. That's great, and for parts of the business, that's really important. How do I make it consumable for everyone else? They've got 5 minutes, they've got 30 seconds to look at something, put something up on a screen. It just has to be immediate. And that's all the way from trusted data through to a user experience that they can consume.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing.
And John?
Yeah, and just to add something different to that, I think we already are, right? The organizations are making decisions based on data. They're just turning to Excel and other ways to do it.
Right.
And they're making poorly informed decisions. So we would love to think that it's just a tools thing, but it's process, it's culture, which can be facilitated by better technology.
Fantastic. So it was a huge pleasure to talk about this, and it's lovely to see the questions bubble up, because I think this is something that's on many of our minds. And this question about how we treat the data in our organizations. I think one of these guys said to me that they called data an asset, and somebody yelled at them because it wasn't on the balance sheet. But actually, I believe that you need to treat data as a part of your inventory, right? So like any good organization, you have an inventory of what you have and what you do. And if you think about data and how you're going to treat that inventory, analytics is one of that great ways to unlock the value out of what that is within your organization. So I hope you have a great rest of the day and the rest of the time here at EXPO. I'll hand back over to our host, and we'll shut down the session.
Thank you you very much to Aimie and to all the speakers. It was brilliant. Thank you. We're now going to break for lunch, and then we'll be back here at 1:40 hearing from IBM. That's all about cloud technology and architecture. So back here at 1:40. Thank you.